Welcome to another Chapter podcast with your hosts, Claire and Rebecca.
Do you love books? Well, you've come to the right place. Join us as we discuss all things books.
Welcome to Chapter 2 of Season 2 of Another Chapter, the podcast. So, Claire, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Delighted with the response to us being back. Everyone was so happy to see us. It was lovely.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to see all the messages and people sharing that they're delighted that we're back. It was quite heartening.
And the shorter episode went down really well as well.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, I think, like, for me at the moment, it fits in, like, feed the baby, run upstairs, record an episode, run back down.
Record the episode, run downstairs, make dinner. Exactly. And like as we kind of said that day, this is like kind of the plan going forward, that these little chatty episodes will be nice and short, hopefully. And then our interview episodes will be the longer ones, all going to plan.
I seem very excited about our February read along as well, I have to say. Everybody seems to love it. I'm actually getting great messages from people about it. It's been really, really cozy and just an overall feel-good book with deeper themes running throughout.
It's Last Chance in Paris by Linda Marin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That is not a Jodie Picoult mispronunciation by me. We could ask Linda, I'm sure, at the launch and get it right before the read along episode.
I'm really looking forward to the book.
Yeah, same. And it seems a little bit different to the other read along books we've had as well, like to some degree.
Yeah.
Which is great as well. Obviously, we don't want to be too samey, and sometimes if books are kind of within the same genre, you'd be worried it's too similar to something we've read along already with, but this seems a bit different. And in a very nice turn of events, the book is being launched in Cork as well, which is amazing. So, Claire, we're going to have a very quick chat about our 2023 kind of roundup, favourite books, what our reading habits were like. So do you want to get started? Tell us what your 2023 looked like reading wise.
Oh, mine was a bit of a disaster because all of my mental capacity was not there when it came to reading. Which was a great year to launch a podcast about reading books, I have to say. Like, the pressure was not on whatsoever. But yeah, no, it was good. Like, I'm just taking a look here at my favourites that I had kind of narrowed down. And all of my top 3 books were from the first half of the year. So I started out strong and then it obviously dwindled as things progressed for me. But yeah,
we'll say that you just started on such a high note that the rest of the year couldn't compete.
Yes.
You just
insane
stopped trying.
I had some really lovely reads towards the end of the year as well. Like Snowed In by Catherine Walsh.
Okay.
I really, really loved that.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Catherine Walsh, in fairness. They're just nice books.
The banter in her books, they're just like top notch.
Yeah.
You can really imagine yourself in these people.
I think we've said before that Catherine Walsh writes like the interactions between people really well, like family interactions, romantic interactions. Yeah, just as you said, like the banter and the
sarcasm,
the chats between people. Yeah.
I love reading sarcasm. I just think it can be beaten. So my top 3 books this year were The Stranding, The Last Lifeboat and Fourth Wing.
All very different books.
Yes.
Very different books.
Extremely different books. So The Stranding basically is kind of technically a post-apocalyptic story, would I be correct in saying?
Yeah.
Where this girl basically moves from England to New Zealand because it's like she knows that they all know that the end of the world is imminent.
Or there's some event, yeah.
So they all know that
it's very vague.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So they all know that something big is coming, and she decides that life is too short. She packs up and she moves to New Zealand, and she finds a dead whale stranded on a beach, and something happens and she decides to climb into the whale in order to survive. And the book follows what happens after that then, which was it's an unusual concept.
It's such a strange concept, and I remember when I was seeing things about this before I read it, and I misunderstood what the whole whale thing was, and I thought it was a live whale and that this person climbed into the whale and was like traveling around inside the whale, like that Bible story. And then read it, and in fairness, as weird as both, the actual story makes a bit more sense in the context.
Noah and the Whale. Oh, that's a band. Sorry, I would totally.
Jonah and the Whale.
Oh, yeah, Noah and the Whale. That's a good band. I like their music actually. Yeah, that's a good one. And that one then I had recommended someone recently when they were asking me what to pick up, and they just found it very odd as a concept and couldn't get into it.
Yeah.
Which I found was a bit weird because I was like, oh, it's so good if you stick with it and just,
And the thing is, that person could, you see, if that person potentially could pick up that book in 3 months and just be in a different mindset, in a different mood, and absolutely could love the book. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you need to give a book that maybe is a bit more unusual a second chance, or it could just be a mood thing. So hopefully, because it is a great book, I think everybody who read that book on Bookstagram anyway loved it.
And I remember when I saw everybody loving it, and I was like, how could you love a book about like a whale or something like that? And you know, in my head I was like, I don't get where you're going. But it was fab. The other book, then I had 3 top books. The second one was The Last Lifeboat by Hazel Gaynor, and we had her on for an interview, and she was fab. And this one we got sent out advanced. We both got sent out advanced copies, didn't we?
Oh, we did. Yeah.
And that is about the children evacuees from England during World War II, and they were assuming that they were going to be bombed or occupied by Nazi Germany, and people were volunteering to be chaperones for these children, and they were going to Canada or America or somewhere. And we followed 2 women in this. We've got Lily, who is a mother, and then we have Alice. Am I right?
I think so.
I'm trying to think of these characters in. Alice then is the chaperone, and Lily decides to evacuate her kids because she thinks that it's the best thing for them, and Alice is the woman that is chaperoning them, and the boat is hit by a torpedo and the ship goes down, and they are the last lifeboat that survives. So they are So they were stuck at sea for 8 days, and we get a mixture in that story of what it's like at home in England on the ship when they're like before they've been torpedoed, and what it's like in the lifeboat when they basically don't know if anyone is coming to save them.
Yes. Yeah.
And that won my top book of the year, because I remember I was in a huge reading slump and I picked it up and I read it, I'd say in 24 hours, and I cried my eyes out. It really, really tugged at my heartstrings. I don't think you could possibly read this book and not feel it.
Yeah. Very similar to one of my top ones as well, where like that I read it in a very short amount of time in the end, and the emotional impact of it. So Fourth Wing, then, if people don't know what Fourth Wing is about at this stage.
Do we need to go into that Fourth Wing? God almighty, that was a good one. Again, took me totally by surprise. I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
Fourth Wing is a fantasy story, a romantasy is what they're calling it, romance and fantasy combined. And we have Violet Sorrengail, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her name right, and she is a cadet at a war college. I'm not even going to try and say the names because I don't want to make food of myself here. And she just basically I keep saying that, just basically. And she essentially has to survive her first year at this college.
Yes.
And it is extremely interesting. There's dragons, there's magical things. There's so much in this that is more than what meets the eye. I think the world building and the character building are brilliant.
Yeah, that's it. You get so immersed in it.
When I read the last section of this book, there was a storm here at home.
Right.
So you had fierce thunder and lightning in your house.
I have no recollection of
and
this.
We hadn't had it yet. Yeah. So you were saying that you had fierce thunder and lightning, and there was a kind of a warning for a storm. And I was like, oh God, this book is getting really good. And I was charging up things I was charging up things to make sure that I had like a torch just in case or whatever, because it was really, really dark too. And I went to the shop. I got in the car. I just made a decision. I was going to the shop.
Yeah.
I bought popcorn. I bought loads of goodies to finish reading the book. And I'll never forget, like, when I was coming up to like the big climax at the end, the thunder was rumbling and the lightning was flashing out. And there I was with my toffee popcorn, just being like, this is so cinematic. It was brilliant.
A totally immersive experience. So
100%. Yeah, it was brilliant. It was just, it felt very sensory. It felt like a sensory experience.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Love it. And that's such a brilliant memory to have of reading it as well. Like the whole experience of it, not just the book itself.
Yes,
I love that.
Yeah. So they were my top three. The Last Lifeboat is the number one.
Yeah. And it's so hard, like, because there were books that I really loved. Like there was two books in particular that I had as my kind of most fun. There was a Tessa Bailey one, Unfortunately Yours, and The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi, which is also fantasy, actually. And I think you'd really enjoy it.
Right.
But it's one that every time I think now of kind of fantasy or different books in terms of the genres I usually read, that immediately comes to mind. And anyone I know who's read it, which isn't that many people, but anyone I do know has loved it as well. So that's always a good sign.
Okay. And if you think about it, and I was only thinking about this earlier when I was wondering like what we were going to talk about, but when you think about it, like all of our childhoods were raised on stories of like fantasy, like Sleeping Beauty, all of these things. And then all of a sudden you get to a stage where people don't always appreciate fantasy as a genre in books. And
that's a really good point, actually.
It just kind of got me thinking, like, when does it stop being okay? Well, and I mean, I'm putting like inverted commas around this, but like, when do we kind of say, okay, I'm not going to read that kind of stuff anymore? When that's what essentially is what starts our love of storytelling and of reading. Like, that's what brings us into this whole fictional world, and then we suddenly close the door on that and expect something else from it.
Maybe it is, now, you've got me thinking about it now, maybe it's just some unconscious connection in our minds between fantasy stories and kind of childish, as in that those stories must be more childish or something, but as we've both seen, they're not like for you definitely wouldn't be giving fourth wing to anyone that was below a certain age.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually. And it's something we could pose to our readers. No, something we could pose to our listeners. Yeah,
it would be something worth posing to people, definitely.
Yeah.
It's made me more open-minded to the genre, definitely, going forward. Like, so far, I have read 3 books in 2024, and 2 of them have been fantasy.
Oh, there you go.
I'm stuck in 2 fantasy series now at the minute, and like, I was explaining it to my partner last night about the whole basis of one of the series, and he was just looking at me kind of being like, okay, it sounds interesting, but it sounds totally bizarre too. And you just have to embrace the bizarreness and read it. But I am really enjoying it, and I find that it is nearly a bigger escape. It is a deeper escape than fiction that's not fantasy. if that makes sense.
I suppose because there is more buy-in to the plots. There's more buy-in to certain types of characters existing, certain events happening.
And it's interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's living in Canada, a very good friend of mine, and she is reading away bits and pieces herself. Like, she's always saying that she'd love to read more, but I was telling her that I had started the Court of Thorns and Roses series, and she was saying that there's been so many random people that she knows have been recommending this, and it sounds like something that she wouldn't be into. And I was saying, when someone explained it to me before, I was like, I don't know if this is for me, but you just get totally engrossed. But she's going to give it a shot.
Ah, that's brilliant. And that's the thing, even if she gives it a shot and doesn't love it, the fact she's tried it and then can definitively say, look, I tried it, that was not for me, that's fair enough. It's just, I suppose, the writing off of it as a genre without trying it, which we've both probably been guilty of in the past, is not fair, because there are so many fabulous books. Like,
that's it. And historical fiction was a big one for me this year. Like, that I feel like I picked it up and enjoyed it and appreciated it properly for the first time last year, not this year, sorry. And Hazel Gaynor's The Last Lifeboat was my favourite book of last year. And I, again, wouldn't usually pick up historical fiction.
Would you not? So I would gravitate towards that now over a lot of other genres for some reason.
Yeah, I suppose before I joined Bookstagram, I really, really leaned into like crime writing and thrillers.
Yeah.
They were my go-to thing. Like, if there was any new book out in that area, I'd always pick it up. But I think like Bookstagram has absolutely encouraged me to broaden my horizons that way. It's made me kind of try new things, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't any thriller that made my top 6.
Just looking at my top 10, same, none of them could be classified as a thriller. None.
Yeah.
Which would actually have been my go-to up to 4 or 5 years ago as well. Like,
yeah, I think I find that very interesting because it shows how much I've stepped out of my comfort zone.
And how much there is out there that is so worth reading if we give it the chance.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Absolutely. And what were
my top 3 were, again, ones that I probably would not have picked up only for Bookstagram. It took me a while to narrow down. I'd actually probably have to go my top 4 because I struggled between 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. But my number 3 and 4, and I haven't specified which is which, but The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell, which was the one we were recommended by Rosemary McCabe on the podcast. Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. Very much kind of slight Project Hail Mary vibes, which obviously I have never spoken about on the podcast before. And but more about more just people focused. But again, it's kind of set, there's a certain amount of it set in space. It's kind of speculative. There's a religious element to it, which is not something I would necessarily be drawn towards, but it works very, very well in this. Just very different to anything else I read last year, but that book is out with a good while. My other top 3/4 is Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, which was the Booker Prize winner, which was like, if you know, some books are just like getting punched in the gut, you know, you just feel absolutely winded after reading them. That was it. I actually started it back in August and I read the first chapter. Chapters are quite long, there's only about 9 or 10 chapters in it. Read the first chapter, got distracted by lots of other books through no fault of this book, and then there was a buddy read of it a few months later, I think it was October, picked it up again and ended up reading most of the rest of the book in 24 hours. I could not put it down. I was sitting up here at 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, finishing it. There's just constant tension.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
So I've seen that it's semi-dystopian or something like that. Yeah. Can you give your information about this book without giving it away? Or is that
so impossible? And actually, funnily enough, from our point of view, like, it opens with a man who is one of the head honchos in the Teachers Union of Ireland, being taken in by this new kind of police, kind of secret police almost, set up by the government, and he's being brought in for basically rousing people against the government through his work in the unions. And the story then centres on, so I think his name is Larry, if my memory serves me right. The story then centres on his wife and family and the fallout of him basically being taken away, the fallout of her coping with figuring out where he's gone, and the fallout of this new kind of really strict government coming in. Not even strict government, but this strict kind of regime under the government coming in, where anybody who talks out against them is brought in. It was actually very eerie reading, because this book was talking about aid corridors being opened, like brief windows where people were being left out of the city, fighting with, like, there was actually too much in it that was so true to life still now. It was very haunting in that regard. And then obviously there's quite a lot that happens in it that is like, oh my God, I can't believe that. So there's that. Like, I still feel like when I think about that book, very deserved Booker winner, I would say. And then my top two were In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, which is about two young men who meet as boys in boarding school. They forge a bond, and then they end up having to go off to war, and the impact that has on the two of them and their relationship. It is a beautiful book, but quite sad. And How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney, which was also in the Booker long list.
Yes.
About a boy who is coping with the death of his mother and moving to a new school, a couple of teachers that are working with him, his dad, and kind of how they're all kind of, their lives converge through this boy and this journey he's on to kind of build a boat to get closer to the memory of his mom, is the best way I can describe it.
So we were saying in our first episode that we're going to finish out all of our episodes by asking each other what we are currently reading.
Yeah.
Very good.
So what are you reading at the moment, Claire?
I have finished, so I just finished reading The Hobbit as part of a group of us that are doing a buddy read on The Lord of the Rings, which I've never read before.
Yes.
I was a little bit intimidated by it, and there was a lot of singing involved in it. But I really enjoyed it. I don't think I was expecting there to be as much singing.
The Hobbit was great fun. Yeah. The Hobbit was great fun.
It was good. So I don't know what's ahead of me with the rest of it. We did watch the movies.
The rest of it's a bit more serious. Like The Hobbit is a bit, you can tell it's like a child story originally, but it definitely has that vibe compared to the main books, we'll say. But like the storytelling is very similar, and like same kind of creatures and same world. Yeah.
And I listened to that on audio. I did like that. Because it felt like a story, it felt like, you were lying in bed and someone was telling you a bedtime story. So it was cool that way.
Yeah.
And I just finished A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I've just started the second book in that series, which is A Court of Mist and Fury. I'm not very far into it. I just started it last night, but yeah, it's good. I thought that I'd find it very confusing to be reading two fantasy series at the same time. But it's actually not.
They're very different to each other, I suppose, as well, yeah.
Yeah, they are. They're extremely different to each other, but they're both good in their own right. I didn't think I'd get into the Sarah J. Maas books as much as what I have done. I'm very pleasantly surprised in my experience of it.
Good, same. I finished the first in the Throne of Glass series, her first series of books. I finished the first one on audio the other day and really, really enjoyed it. I have the second one lined up already, but went with something else on audio in between, just to kind of as a palate cleanser. Yeah. But I really enjoyed that as well. So I'm well geared up, and I'm actually glad, because as is typical with me, I knew it was a series, but I didn't realise how much of a series. It's an 8-book series. This is like getting into Fourth Wing and realising there's actually 5 books planned, and me going, I just want everything to be done in 2 books. Yeah. Thanks very much. While also not wanting it to be over at the same time. But at least the Throne of Glass one, the series is done. All 8 books are out, so I can fly through them, and hopefully.
I've seen people online asking what order to read different books from different series in. So I don't know, do they all cross over at some point?
Well, I've seen someone saying that the series you're reading now, which was a later series, to read that first, then the Throne of Glass. There is a book coming out at the end of this month from her. I think it's Crescent City is the series. It's a trilogy, and it's the 3rd in the trilogy. Trilogy. I know nothing about those books, but she has loads of books. She has loads of books. So we've plenty reading ahead of us. We could read nothing but Sarah J. Maas for the year and still have, have plenty of books. Yeah. I'm also reading Sam Blake's new book, Three Little Birds, which is a thriller. I got to go to the launch of that there last week, which was lovely. A very enjoyable evening. Again, yet again, seeing how the Irish writer scene, they're so good to support each other, especially the crime writers. You had like Andrea Mara was doing kind of the interviewing. Catherine Ryan Howard was there. There was a load of, you could see people were there kind of supporting each other. And I'm also doing a buddy read of The Goldfinch, which I need to get back into, plus Lord of the Rings buddy read, plus Stephen King buddy read, which started today as well. Don't ask me where I'm getting the time to read / listen to all these books.
That's very impressive.
Considering my commute to work now is only about 20 minutes, I don't exactly have loads of time. But headphones on when I'm home and ignore the kids is kind of the plan.
Yeah. That's your 2024 New Year's resolution. Ignore the children and break the books. I started reading on audio there, The Blue Zones of Happiness. I don't know if you heard about blue zones.
No.
They're the happiest places in the world.
Right.
Scientifically, did you know? Yeah. So
like,
this,
like literal geographical places, like.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I think so. There's a couple of places in the world that are blue zones where people are happier, they live longer, and this guy has gone and done an awful lot of research on it, and there's a test and everything that you can do to see where your levels of happiness lie.
Oh wow.
So you can see whether what areas in your life you need to focus more on to bring that happiness up, so your sense of purpose, or all of those kind of things. So I started that, was it yesterday or the day before? It's non-fiction, and it's very, very interesting. I always enjoy reading something like this at the start of the year because it makes me focus a little bit on myself, I suppose, and what I want to enhance or improve. I don't know whether they're the right words, but a bit more introspective than losing yourself in a book. It allows me to take stock and consider what my priorities are, I suppose.
And it's in the back of your head then for the year as well. When you're doing things, you're able to think, that ties back to this.
And there are nine tips that they had at the start, towards the start of the book, for living a longer life and a happier life. And one of them was to have 1 to 2 glasses of wine a day, either with friends or with dinner. And you're not allowed to save them up and have them all on a Saturday. But I was like, do you know what?
I couldn't drink 7 to 14 glasses of wine now in one day anyway. So I'd quite happily space out.
I thought you were going to say you couldn't drink 7 glasses of wine ever. And I was like, it's wine. You're drinking the wrong wine. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting. It looks like people's sense of community and their values in life. So whether you spend an awful lot of time at work, and if you're happy to do that compared to someone who spends an awful lot of time at work and isn't happy, that people's priorities are different. Yeah, it's cool. It's interesting.
And how did you come across that book now?
I actually had it saved from ages ago as one that I had found interesting. And then when I was kind of going, what'll I read in between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, I said I'd take a look at that one.
Very good. So I think, Sinead, we've touched on our 2023 reading. we have a little chat.
Yes.
Had a little chat about kind of our current reading, and also congrats to our winner of our competition. We had loads of interest in it, which was lovely. Joanna Fitzgerald won all of those 10 books, and they will be going off to her ASAP. It was lovely chatting, Claire, and we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Slán.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of Another Chapter podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share to keep the book conversation going. Thank you to Helen Becerra for the graphics, Mark Neville for the mixing, and to each of our contributors. Music is Make It Work by All Good Folks.
Don't forget to follow along on Instagram at Another Chapter Podcast. We'll see you there.